The idea they smiled at the city was glowing in soft gold as the sun slipped behind rows of office buildings, and inside one of those buildings sat a woman who was tired of being underestimated. Her name was Emily Carter, a name so common that most people forgot it the moment they heard it, and maybe that was part of the problem. Emily had spent years being the dependable one, the organized one, the woman who took notes in meetings while others took credit. She was intelligent, strategic, and creative, yet somehow always described as supportive instead of visionary. If you have ever felt like your ideas were heard but not truly listened to, then you already understand the world Emily was navigating. Before we step further into her journey, take a moment to subscribe and become part of this growing community of strong women rising quietly, and tell me in the comments where you are watching from, because this story belongs to every woman who has ever been smiled at instead of taken seriously. That morning had started like every other. The alarm rang at 6. She tied her hair back neatly, chose a structured blazer that made her feel confident, and reviewed her presentation while sipping her coffee. For months she had been building something after hours, something powerful, something designed to protect women in workplaces where their voices were often dismissed. It was a digital platform that allowed employees to safely document misconduct, unfair treatment, and silenced contributions. It was smart, scalable, and necessary. Emily knew it. The research proved it. The market demand confirmed it. All she needed was support. When she entered the conference room, the usual energy was already there. Laptops open. Casual chatter. The sound of chairs sliding across the floor. She took her seat and waited patiently for her turn, listening as two senior executives presented ideas that were not half as detailed as hers but were received with nods of approval. When her name was finally called, she stood up calmly, connected her laptop, and began to speak with steady confidence. She outlined the problem first, then the solution, then the long-term growth model. She explained how transparency would not only protect employees but strengthen company culture. Her voice did not shake. Her slides were precise. Her vision was clear. For a brief moment, there was silence. The kind of silence that feels like possibility. Then someone gave a small chuckle. Another leaned back in his chair and said, "That's interesting, Emily." Interesting. The word women hear when people do not want to say bold or brilliant. A second voice added, "It might be a bit ambitious for now." A third said, "Maybe something like that could be explored later, with more senior oversight." The room filled with polite smiles. Not cruel laughter. Not open mockery. Just the soft dismissal that women know too well. The kind that sounds supportive but feels limiting. Emily felt the familiar tightening in her chest, the internal question that so many women ask themselves in moments like this. Was I too confident? Did I aim too high? Should I have simplified it? But then she remembered the late nights, the spreadsheets, the coding sessions, the conversations with other women who had shared their stories of being talked over or overlooked. She remembered the messages she had received from friends who said, "If this existed, I would have felt less alone." And in that moment, she understood something important. The doubt in that room was not about the strength of her idea. It was about their inability to imagine her leading it. She finished her presentation with grace, thanked them for their time, and sat down without arguing. She did not defend herself aggressively. She did not shrink either. She simply observed. And what none of them realized was that this was not a proposal seeking permission. It was an announcement disguised as a presentation. Emily had already built the beta version. She had already secured a small network of early testers, mostly women from different industries who believed in the mission. She had already registered the company name. What she wanted from that meeting was partnership. What she walked away with was clarity. That evening, as city lights flickered outside her apartment window, Emily opened her laptop again. The silence of her living room felt different from the silence in that boardroom. This silence felt powerful. She reviewed user feedback, adjusted features, refined the onboarding process, and scheduled a virtual launch meeting with her growing community. Every click of her keyboard felt like reclaiming space. She was not building this platform out of revenge. She was building it because too many women had been told to wait their turn. As the night deepened, She leaned back in her chair and allowed herself a small smile. They had not seen her clearly. They had seen a polite woman with a neat presentation. They had not seen the strategist, the builder, the founder. But they would. And when that moment came, it would not be announced with anger. It would arrive with results. Emily Carter, the woman with the common name and the underestimated presence, was quietly building something extraordinary. And this time, the world would not smile politely. It would listen. The quiet build after the meeting, nothing changed on the outside, and that was the strangest part. The same emails arrived in Emily Carter's inbox. The same morning greetings echoed across the office. The same polite smiles followed her down the hallway. But inside her, something had shifted. She was no longer waiting for approval. She was no longer hoping someone would see her potential and give her permission to grow. She had already decided she would move forward, with or without them. In the days that followed, Emily noticed something familiar yet uncomfortable. In another meeting, a senior colleague presented an idea about improving internal reporting systems. It sounded very close to what she had shared. The language was different, the structure was simpler, but the core idea was the same. This time, the room nodded with interest. Questions were asked. Suggestions were offered. No one laughed. Emily sat quietly and listened. She did not interrupt. She did not point out the similarity. She simply observed the difference. The idea was acceptable now because it was not coming from her. For many women, this moment would have felt defeating. For Emily, it became fuel. That evening, she left the office without frustration. Instead, she walked with clarity. The air was cool, and the city lights reflected on the pavement as she replayed the meeting in her mind. She understood something important. If she stayed, she would always be one step behind someone who felt more entitled to lead. But if she built her own space, she would not need to compete for recognition. She would create it. At home, she changed into comfortable clothes, tied her hair into a loose bun, and opened her laptop. Her small apartment had become her real office. Sticky notes covered one wall, each holding ideas, reminders, and timelines. Her dining table was now a workspace filled with notebooks and diagrams. She opened the platform dashboard and reviewed the latest updates. The beta version had grown quietly. 50 users had signed up. Then 80. Then 120. Most of them were women from different industries, teachers, accountants, designers, junior managers, each one searching for a safer way to document their experiences. Emily read every message carefully. One woman wrote, "I've never had a space where I could report things without fear." Another said, "Even knowing this exists makes me feel stronger." Emily paused for a moment after reading that line. Stronger. That was the word she wanted her platform to represent. Not revenge. Not exposure for drama. Strength through transparency. She began refining the features with focus and patience. She improved the privacy settings, simplified the user interface, and added a secure documentation system. She scheduled online meetings with 2 female software engineers who had agreed to help her part-time. They spoke openly about their own workplace experiences, about being talked over in meetings, about watching ideas receive praise only after someone else repeated them. These conversations were not filled with bitterness. They were filled with determination. Together, they were not just building software. They were building protection. During the day, Emily continued doing her regular job with professionalism. She completed assignments on time, attended meetings, and maintained her calm presence. No one suspected that after office hours, she was leading a growing digital movement. She did not announce her progress. She did not seek validation on social media. She understood that real power often grows quietly. There were moments of doubt, of course. One night, after a long day, she stared at the screen and wondered if she was doing too much. She wondered if leaving stability for uncertainty was wise. She thought about the comfort of a steady paycheck and the safety of routine. But then she remembered the meeting room laughter, the polite dismissals, the subtle reduction of her ambition. She remembered the messages from women thanking her for creating a space they never had before. And she realized that comfort was not the same as fulfillment. Weeks passed, and the platform continued to grow. A small online community formed around it. Women shared advice, encouraged one another, and celebrated small victories. Emily watched the activity increase and felt something she had not felt in a long time, confidence that did not depend on anyone else's approval. One evening, as she closed her laptop, her phone buzzed with a notification. A local journalist had signed up and requested a conversation about the platform's mission. Emily stared at the message for a few seconds, her heart beating faster. This was not just growth. This was visibility. She leaned back in her chair and looked around her small apartment, at the sticky notes, the diagrams, the careful plans. What had started as an idea smiled at in a conference room was now becoming something real. She was no longer just an employee with potential. She was a founder in motion. Emily Carter did not build loudly. She built carefully. And as the city outside continued its usual rhythm, she knew that soon, the world that once overlooked her would begin to pay attention. The message from the journalist sat unread for almost 10 minutes before Emily Carter finally opened it. Her hands were steady, but her thoughts were racing. The email was simple and professional. The journalist had discovered her platform through a user recommendation and wanted to feature it in a digital column focused on workplace innovation and women-led startups. Emily read the message twice, then a third time, just to make sure it was real. For months, she had been building quietly. Now, someone outside her circle had noticed. She replied carefully, keeping her tone confident but calm. She explained the purpose of the platform, the mission behind it, and the reason it mattered. She did not mention the laughter in the boardroom. She did not talk about being dismissed. She focused on the future, on protection, on empowerment, on transparency. Within days, the interview was scheduled. The night before the virtual interview, Emily barely slept. Not because she was afraid, but because she understood the weight of this moment. This was not just publicity. This was proof. She reviewed her notes, practiced her answers, and reminded herself why she started. When the camera turned on the next morning, she did not try to sound impressive. She simply told the truth. She spoke about the quiet struggles many women face at work. She spoke about ideas being minimized. She spoke about the importance of documented accountability. Her voice was clear. Her message was direct. She did not attack companies. She spoke about building better ones. 3 days later, the article went live. The headline read, "Emily Carter builds a platform giving women a safer voice at work." Emily stared at the screen in disbelief. Her name was there. Her mission was clear. Her work was recognized. Within hours, traffic on the platform tripled. New users signed up every minute. Messages filled her inbox. Women from different cities, different industries, and different backgrounds were joining. Some thanked her. Some shared their stories. Some simply wrote, "Finally." At the office, the shift was immediate. People who had never shown interest in her ideas suddenly asked casual questions. "I saw something online," one colleague said lightly. "Is that your project?" Another smiled and added, "Impressive traction." The same meeting room that once felt small now felt different. Not because the walls had changed, but because the way they looked at her had. But the real turning point came a week later. The platform received its first major report involving a well-known mid-sized company accused of suppressing internal complaints. The documentation was detailed and verified. Emily and her small team reviewed it carefully, ensuring everything was legally sound. They followed strict guidelines, protecting identities while presenting facts. The story was published through a partner news outlet. Within 24 hours, it began trending in professional circles. Conversations sparked online. Other employees came forward with similar experiences. Then something unexpected happened. Emily recognized the company name connected to the second major submission. Her heart skipped for a second when she saw it. It was her company. The documentation was accurate. The evidence was strong. The reports were not exaggerated. They were real. She felt a wave of emotion, not fear, not anger, but understanding. This was bigger than personal history. This was the system responding to accountability. That night, she sat in her apartment staring at the city lights again, just like she had on the night after the laughter. But everything felt different now. Back then, she was building in silence. Now, the world was listening. She knew what would happen next. Once the story went public, there would be questions. There would be tension. There would be uncomfortable conversations. The following morning, news vans parked outside her office building. Employees whispered in hallways. Emails were marked urgent. An emergency board meeting was called. And for the first time, Emily was invited not as a junior contributor, not as a supportive presence, but as the founder of the platform at the center of the conversation. As she walked into the boardroom, she noticed the difference immediately. The laughter was gone. The casual smiles were replaced with tight expressions. The same chairs. The same table. But the energy had shifted completely. Her name was no longer spoken lightly. It carried weight now. When someone finally asked, "Emily, is this your platform?" she did not hesitate. She looked around the room calmly and answered, "Yes." No long speech. No raised voice. Just one clear word. Outside, cameras were setting up. Reporters were preparing. And inside that room, the realization settled slowly across every face. The woman they once described as ambitious had built something unstoppable. Emily Carter had not raised her voice to be heard. She had built something that made silence impossible. And this was only the beginning. The morning felt different before Emily Carter even arrived at the office. Her phone had been buzzing since sunrise. News alerts. Messages from users. Notifications from reporters requesting statements. The second report published through her platform had spread quickly overnight, and now it was everywhere. Professional networks were discussing it. Social media was sharing it. And the company named in the report, her company, was under public review. Emily stood in front of her apartment mirror for a moment before leaving. She did not look nervous. She looked focused. She chose a simple navy blazer, tied her hair neatly, and reminded herself that this was never about revenge. It was about accountability. When she stepped outside the office building, cameras were already positioned near the entrance. Reporters stood in small groups, speaking into microphones. Employees slowed their steps as they walked past. Some looked anxious. Some looked confused. Some avoided eye contact. Emily walked through the doors calmly. She did not rush. She did not hide. She had nothing to hide. An emergency board meeting had been scheduled. This time, she was not sitting quietly in the corner. Her name was printed clearly on the agenda as founder and CEO of the transparency platform that had published the report. As she entered the conference room, she felt the weight of the moment. The same polished table. The same chairs. The same people who once smiled politely at her idea. But the energy had changed completely. No one was laughing now. The board chair cleared his throat and began speaking about public perception, internal investigations, and company reputation. The words sounded formal and controlled, but beneath them was concern. Then someone turned toward Emily and asked carefully, "Did you personally review the documentation before publication?" The question was not aggressive. It was cautious. Emily met their eyes and answered simply, "Yes. Every document was verified according to our legal standards." Her voice was steady. She had prepared for this. They asked about privacy protocols. She explained them. They asked about security systems. She described them clearly. Every answer she gave was calm and precise. She was no longer the employee asking for permission to build. She was the founder explaining the structure of something real and solid. Outside the building, reporters began broadcasting live updates. The story had grown larger than anyone expected. Employees inside the company began whispering about internal emails being sent, about senior leaders meeting privately, about damage control strategies. But Emily felt no chaos inside herself. She felt clarity. She had built her platform carefully. She had followed the law. She had protected identities. The truth was documented, not exaggerated. During a pause in the meeting, one executive finally said what everyone was thinking. You could have handled this internally. It was not a question. It was a quiet accusation. Emily looked at him calmly. Internal channels were used, she replied. They were ignored. The room fell silent. No one interrupted her. No one smiled politely this time. The silence was different from the silence months ago. Back then, it carried doubt. Now, it carried understanding. By midday, the company released a public statement announcing a formal investigation. 3 senior managers were placed on temporary leave pending review. The announcement spread quickly. News channels replayed clips from interviews discussing workplace transparency. Emily's name was mentioned alongside words like innovation, leadership, and reform. She did not celebrate. She understood that real change required responsibility, not pride. Later that afternoon, she stepped outside the building again. This time, reporters approached her directly. Cameras turned toward her. Microphones extended forward. Emily, what is your goal with this platform? One reporter asked. She answered clearly, to create safer workplaces. To ensure that when women speak, they are documented and heard. Another asked, are you targeting specific companies? She shook her head. We are targeting silence. Her response circulated online within minutes. Comments poured in from women sharing their own experiences. Some thanked her openly. Some said they finally felt seen. Emily read a few of the messages that evening when she returned home. She felt tired, but it was a meaningful kind of tiredness. The kind that comes from standing firm. As night settled over the city, she stood once again by her apartment window, looking at the lights below. She thought back to the day of her presentation. The soft laughter. The word ambitious spoken with doubt. The polite smiles. And she realized something important. The cameras outside her office were not the true turning point. The turning point had been the moment she decided not to shrink. Now, the world was watching. Not because she shouted, but because she built something strong enough to demand attention. The laughter had faded completely. In its place was respect. And Emily Carter knew that this was not the end of her story. It was proof that when women refuse to stay silent, even the most powerful rooms are forced to listen. The days after the cameras turned on were quieter than anyone expected. There were no dramatic confrontations. No shouting in hallways. No public arguments. Instead, there was a heavy silence that settled over the company like morning fog. Internal investigations began. 3 executives resigned within 2 weeks. Policies were reviewed. New reporting systems were introduced. The same building that once echoed with polite dismissals now carried careful conversations. Emily Carter did not celebrate. She did not post victory messages online. She did not give interviews filled with pride. She understood something important. This was never about humiliating anyone. It was about creating space where women could stand without shrinking. Real change is not loud. It is steady. It is firm. It is built piece by piece. Her platform continued to grow. Thousands of women signed up within a month. Some shared stories from corporate offices. Others from hospitals, schools, retail stores, and small businesses. The stories were different, but the feeling behind them was the same. Many had felt ignored. Many had felt minimized. Many had been told to wait their turn. Through the platform, they found something simple but powerful: documentation, community, and validation. One evening, Emily received a message that made her pause. It was from a young woman named Claire who had used the platform to safely document repeated misconduct from a supervisor. Because of the evidence she gathered, the company was forced to act. Claire wrote, "I almost quit my job because I thought no one would believe me. Your platform gave me proof and courage." Emily read the message twice. Then she closed her laptop and allowed herself to feel the weight of it. This was why she started. Not for headlines. Not for recognition. For moments like this. Months passed, and Emily was invited to speak at a national technology summit focused on women in leadership. When she stepped onto the stage, she did not see a room full of strangers. She saw reflections of her own journey. Women who had been interrupted mid-sentence. Women who had been called ambitious as if it were a warning. Women who had ideas waiting for space. She shared her story honestly. She spoke about being smiled at instead of supported. She spoke about building quietly. She spoke about the power of refusing to shrink. At the end of her speech, the room stood in applause. It was not just applause for her success. It was applause for possibility. For every woman who had ever doubted herself because someone else doubted her first. Back at her former company, things had changed permanently. New leadership was in place. Transparent policies were implemented. Internal reporting systems were strengthened. Some of the same colleagues who once questioned her now referenced her platform in professional discussions. The difference was clear. Respect had replaced dismissal. But the most powerful change was inside Emily herself. She no longer felt the need to prove her worth in rooms that underestimated her. She had learned that when you build something meaningful, recognition becomes a result, not a request. She had turned quiet doubt into structured action. She had transformed laughter into leadership. One late evening, she returned to her apartment and stood by the same window where she once sat questioning everything. The city lights looked the same, but she felt different. Stronger. Clearer. At peace. She understood that her name was common. Emily Carter. There were thousands of women with that name. And that was exactly the point. This story was not about being extraordinary from the start. It was about becoming unstoppable when underestimated. If you are listening to this story and you see yourself in Emily, remember this: you do not need permission to build your vision. You do not need approval to believe in your ideas. The world may smile politely at first. It may question you. It may underestimate you. But when your work is solid, when your mission is clear, and when your heart is strong, the same voices that once doubted you will grow silent. And if this story moved you, if you believe in powerful women rising, take a moment right now to hit the subscribe button so you do not miss the next story. Share your thoughts in the comments and tell me which country you are watching from, because this community is growing across borders, and your voice matters here. When you subscribe and comment, you become part of this journey, and you will be notified when the next empowering story is released. Emily Carter's journey began with laughter. It grew in silence. It faced the cameras. And it ended with something far greater than revenge. It ended with respect. And sometimes, for a woman who has been underestimated her whole life, respect is the most powerful victory of all.